For us here in Tasmania, early spring has arrived and it's time for me to do some planting. What I'm planting today is some tomato plants in the greenhouse and also some seeds. Some that are going to be raised as seedlings and also some that will go direct into the ground. Now, with the tomato plants that I have here, I've raised these indoors. The germination has been achieved by putting them over our fireplace in the evenings when it's nice and warm, and by doing that the seeds come through in about a week, and then I bring them out into the sun in the sunroom during the day to keep them growing. So a little bit of backs and forths. As they become more advanced like these, I have left them in the sunroom, haven't taken them indoors, so they've become more used to the cool nights, and there's very little transition for these going then into the greenhouse. Now, I'm not going to plant all these plants in the greenhouse. I only need about 4 plants in what I'm planning to do. The remainder I will actually stage into pots to grow on to more advanced plants for outdoor planting a little bit later in the season. This group here are for the summer crop. So they actually won't go into the ground until the end of October, so another 8 weeks away. So by that time they will have grown to this size, be staged on to little pots, and be reasonably advanced plants also by the time they go into the ground. Now, if you're wondering when I actually started these more advanced ones were approximately 6 weeks ago, and these little ones here were about 2 weeks ago. So there's about, well, I say 2, it's probably 2.5 weeks actually. So this is about a week and a half from actual germination. They've really jumped up quite nicely. And what I'm going to do with these right now is to thin them out, because I put in generally at least 2 seeds in each place I want a plant to grow. And sometimes it's hard to separate seeds and you have more there than you actually need. So I snip off the ones that I don't want. I don't pull them out because that can disturb the roots of the others. I just snip them off at the base level and remove them. And that way they're thinned and ready to come on. I grow usually about 6 plants per punnet. So with them thinned out like this, they have space to grow on. Now, planting too many seed and thinning might seem like a waste of seed to some, and it can be if you're buying it and it's expensive to buy seeds quite often. Most of this seed I have kept myself, so when you're keeping your own seed, it's quite plentiful and isn't an expensive process. If you only plant a single seed in every place, you quite frequently get misses, and then you may need to plant more. So it's really, I think, more useful to put in that couple and have some redundancy. But that's just my opinion. Now, you might be interested in what varieties I'm growing here. I have Purple Cherokee, which was recommended by a viewer, and thank you for that recommendation. We look forward to trying it. It's one I have never grown before. I have here one called, I've marked it as LJ. It stands for Lester Jones. Lester Jones was a naturopath locally here, and a friend gave me this seed. They say that he actually bred this tomato variety, and so I'm interested to actually see what it's like. I have not yet grown it, so it's an experiment. I've also got a couple of punnets of Romas, which are seed from what we grew last year. And I like to grow Romas because they're such a reliable source tomato. Now, in these more advanced ones, I have Legend, which is a variety that will handle, or should I say set fruit at lower temperatures. And this is the first season that I've grown that, so I'm going to be really interested to see what it's like. And I've also got Sindel, which I grew last year and found quite a reliable greenhouse tomato, and also okay outdoors. So quite a variety of tomatoes here, and they should produce quite a bit of fruit in the summer. Now, as we head down to the greenhouse to put those plants in, I should mention that the weather here in Tasmania has been pretty wild the last couple of weeks. So, late winter, early spring, however you like to frame the weather. The roaring 40s, as the sailors named it in the past, has really lived up to that name. And we've had some pretty severe winds and also a lot of rain. I've really lost track of how much rain has been in the gauge, but in cumulative terms it's been over a couple hundred millimetres in the last 2 weeks. But the wind has done a lot of damage for other people around. For us, because we are protected by those trees to the west and also mountains behind that, our wind impact has been somewhat minimal. No serious damage to anything. It's mostly been to plants. There's been a couple of things broken off, some things blown over, such as these decorative trees of Elizabeth's flower garden. And for me, the most serious is our grapefruit tree, which has blown over, and it's totally loaded with fruit at this time of the year. So having that heavy load means that, of course, it's really hard to stand it up. So that's going to require some major work, and probably will be the subject of another video. Now, I've targeted these 2 beds as the place I'm going to plant the tomatoes in the greenhouse this year. And my plan is to only plant 2 plants per bed and to grow them by an espalier method that you would see if you watched the film I did of Charlie's Place, where you actually bring the branches out and run them around and open the plant up quite a lot. So it'll be the first time that I've personally grown using that method, so it's a little bit of an experiment for me. Now, things around the edge, like this rocket and this parsley plant here, can stay, but this parsley that's in the middle has to go. So I'm going to harvest that and take it inside where it can be used over the next few days, the better part of it anyway. We have other parsley outside as well, and new plants coming. This one will stay and will go to seed, so plenty of parsley. So the remainder of these plants has to come out and will go on the compost. They have good root systems. They've been here for at least a year. So with those plants out of the way, I'm going to dig 2 holes in here, and fairly deep holes, and fill those with compost. Might need something a bit heavier to dig with. Get those roots out, so this will go down nicely. Now, there are some roots in here that don't come from the parsley, but they actually come from the black currants which are growing outside the greenhouse. And they send their roots in here looking for some extra nutrition. They're a little bit of a pest being so close because they pull nutrients out of the soil that would feed the plants I'm wanting to grow. So bringing in here, you'll see I've dug a fairly deep hole, and I'm going to fill that with compost and then plant the plant into that. So I'll just repeat this another 3 times. I have here a little bit of blood and bone and commercial grade compost. Now what I'm going to do is mix those as I put them in. So a shovel full and a little sprinkle, mix it in the hole, and a little bit of soil into it as well, and progressively build that up. What's the purpose of this deep hole and the compost, you might wonder? It's basically in order to encourage deep root growth and of course feed the plant progressively across the year. But deep root growth is going to mean that it has better water supply and not going to dry out as easily. Now you can do this of course by some time and actually sort of filling it with the stuff from your kitchen and from weeds and so on, and letting it naturally compost and continuing to build it up over a few months. But this is the speed method, and that is ready to plant in. I don't want to mound it up at all. I want it like that so that it's going to drop and any water is going to keep feeding those roots. So I need to do that another 3 times. Now before I tidy the beds up and lose the locations of my hole, I'm going to put in the stakes down the side of the hole. It's always good to get your stakes in either before you plant or immediately after you plant when the plants are young. Don't wait until they've grown a bit and put the stakes in, because then you'll be damaging the roots. Now that I've done that and prepared the beds, I'm ready to plant. Now in this bed I'm going to plant the legend, and I've got 5 plants in this punnet, so I'm only planting 2 here. That one's volunteering to come out, and 1 off that. Now we'll deal with the rest in a moment. I always plant as deeper than the surface is. If you've got a more advanced plant, also plant it quite deep, and that way you get your roots down. Ideally, I would prefer to have a more advanced plant than these going in, but if I had planted them, the seeds, perhaps a month earlier, I would. But this is still quite good. So I can get my fingers in there, get up and around, and then I'll come back and give those some water just to settle them in nicely. The next pair going in are Sindel, and I noticed that these plants haven't grown quite as fast as the Legend, but I'm going to pick a couple of the bigger ones. Oh, they're disturbing a little bit. Those will go there. This one up there. Right, so there's tomatoes in the ground, ready for hopefully some early cropping here in the greenhouse. One of the ways I think that you can judge whether it's the right time to actually plant out tomatoes is to see if you have any volunteer germination, assuming of course you've grown tomatoes in the area before. So here in this bed where I grew tomatoes last year, I now have tomatoes germinating from anything that's dropped. So that gives me a good indication that it is the right temperature for me to put tomatoes into the greenhouse here and get them underway. There's no germination occurring outside of tomatoes yet. It's way too cold outside. So yes, if you've had tomatoes growing previously and there's been seed that's dropped around, have a look and see if you've got any volunteer germination. So with the ones that haven't gone into the ground, what I'm going to do is to pot them on. So I'm colour coding them so that I have a bit of memory of what I've got growing. So the Legend here is growing in the blue pots. I'll put my tag in one, and I've partially filled these little pots and watered that so I can just drop the plants in. and top it off. And they will grow on to a reasonable size in these for the next, well, maybe a month to 6 weeks. I may need to take them into a larger pot before they go outdoors, but we'll just see how the growth goes. I am trying this year to grow cabbage successively, and so the best way of doing that is to start from seed yourself and little seedlings. So I've set myself a reminder at the beginning of every month to start at least 4 plants, and of course to get 4 you probably need to put in more than 4 seeds. So I have actually 4 cabbage plants here. This is a spring variety. They were planted a month ago. I'm ready to plant more seeds for this month. I'll only do it 3 months in a row. This will be the second planting and then another one in a month's time. But these plants are not quite ready to go out in the garden in my judgment. I'll probably leave them for another 1 to maybe 2 weeks. Maybe 1 week will be enough, just to let them advance a little bit more. And they'll need quite a bit of protection when they go out because there is likely to be some slugs or snails around that would go straight for these little tender cabbages. Got a couple of kale here that I need to get out too. I did put in more seed than that, but I think actually a slug or snail got at them. So that's all I have there. So I'm going to put in some more of those seed today, and I'm also going to plant some other things outside that are good to go direct in the ground. So let's have a look at that. As weather has allowed over the last few weeks, I have been cleaning these beds up, getting rid of what was growing in them and preparing for spring planting. I already have moved some of the lettuce plants, yes they were lettuce plants, that were coming up where I planted the onions into a bed on their own. Also planted some in the greenhouse. There's still lots of plants there, but so they'll probably just have to go because I don't really need them growing there. But into this bed, I'm going to put my first cycle of planting. Now, there are 3 main things that I plant in 2 beds every spring, and I put one in here early in the spring, and I put another probably around about 6 weeks to 2 months later in a second bed, which will be the one behind you, which currently has the mustard growing in it. So what do I plant in these? Well, I plant some silver beet, or in this one I'm putting in the actual rainbow chard. I put in about 4 plants. I put in some beetroot and some carrots. 2 lots here. One is called All Seasons, the other Every Season. Now, as far as I am aware, I don't know that there is any difference between them. I planted the Every Season last year and quite enjoyed that as a carrot. It's quite a nice big carrot. We still have some that I have pulled. They were over in the far bed there, but I have pulled them and put them in the cellar for now, and we will use those, the last of them, over the last few weeks. So that was Every Season. I suspect All Season really is an older name for the same carrot, or a very close carrot. So I'll put some of those in, and I have made many videos of how I do this. Planting into compost, it's very simple. One of the main things with getting the carrots in is not to overseed it. Get it nice and sparse so that you don't have to thin. And it's better to have a little bit missing and a bit of space than to need to come and thin them. It doesn't take very much carrot seed to grow quite a lot of carrots. The biggest problem I have with carrots early generally is slugs will be a problem. So at the point where they're about to come through, I usually put some of the snail bait around. I still have quite a bit of seed from that every season. It just takes so little carrot seed to plant an area. The beetroot I'm planting is Crimson Globe. Grew it last year, nice beetroot. So the beetroot and the chard I will cover, but the carrot I simply water it in, and I don't do any active covering in the compost. So they're a couple of the key plantings for the day done, but I have one more that I need to do. I'm running a little bit late on it, and it's basically the weather that's kept me from it, and that is getting my early potatoes in. Now, the area I want to grow my early crop of potatoes is under this plastic, and I'm hoping it's kept it dry enough that I can actually get in there and work, but I'm not really sure because the wind has been strong, and if you'll see down the back, there's actually ripped a piece of plastic and I opened it up. I'm really surprised, even the way the wind was, that it didn't take the whole lot off, but it had a reasonable amount of rain and water sitting on it, and that helps to hold it down. There's an opening here, so this area is going to be a bit wet and a problem, but hopefully this ground is dry enough mostly that I could actually work it to get some potatoes in. And I think I might be able to do it. I'm not sure that I could get the rotary hoe through, but this section has been rotary hoed already, and it might be enough to get an early crop, usually around the end of August, very beginning of September. I like to get some in the ground that's going to give us potatoes in December to dig. So I'll take some of this plastic off and see if it's good enough. Okay, this is the area exposed, and the wind is getting up. There's some spots that are a bit damp, others that it actually looks dry, so it's nice and soft. I think I can get a couple of rows of potatoes in here. It's not going to be quite as much as I would normally plant this time of the year. I normally plant a bit more, but it'll bridge the gap till the next lot. So I'll get in and do that. I won't include that in this film. I've had plenty of films where I plant potatoes, and so you can always go and watch one of the others. But I'll get in and get at least 2, maybe 3 rows of potatoes in here for an early spring start. So, as you can see, the wind's starting to blow things around, and we might be in for a little bit more weather over the next week or two, but at least there'll be some rain that'll get the seeds up, and that's a good thing. So that'll be all for this video. I'll probably be back with another one, working on that grapefruit tree to see what we can do to rescue it, if it's possible, fairly soon. Thanks for watching.